young Russian player. And Fedoseev had gotten into first place in the penultimate round, the second to last round, by playing white against the Caro-Kann, advanced variation, knight f3 line, very calm c3, and then b4 clamping down on c5. And you see white wins the fight for the c5 square that black tries to initiate a little bit with a5, and now black's reduced to trying to fight somewhere else. And here are standings for those who wanted to see that real quick. You see that Ryazantsev at the end finishes with 7 points, half a point ahead of Grishuk and Tomaszewski, two of the favorites with 2,700 ratings. A full point against Peter Svidler, also rating favorite. And a full point ahead of Fedoseev, who went into the last round tied with him but lost in the last round. An especially good tournament for Ryazantsev, and also, I think, pretty good results for Fedoseev, Gogunov, and Oparin. Okay, so, whoops. Where's our game? Okay, so we see here white completely stopping c5. Black has to come up with another plan for developing their pieces, and black plays this very slow bishop h7, knight g6, bishop e7 reorganization. And Fedoseev just grabbed a bunch of space on the queen side with a4, a5, stopping b6 from allowing black to recontrol c5. So now, white spent so much time on the queen side. This f6 move looks quite good. Cracking e5, right, with the positions of the two knights. Black wins control over e5. And it seems like it could be good for black here, as they're now breaking with e5 as well. However, this piece is awkward, and white has these outposts on d4 and c5 for his knights. And suddenly black comes under an initiative from white in response to this successful f6 and e5. First, white threatens knight e6. Black stops it. Now he threatens knight b7. Black has to defend it. You can see the strength of these knights here at the moment. Now, knight f5. This is not an outpost. This is very temporary in view of this guy. But for the moment, the knights take away every single normal square for the queen. And then white follows with f4. There's a shortage of spaces for this knight, and grabs a pawn on the queen side. And now suddenly all the time invested in the a pawn is getting a little bit dangerous. And this game got very, very complicated here. As black counterattacks on the king side now. But having won this pawn on b7 with the knight activity, white has this strong a5 pawn. Black's really committed to doing aggressive play, and now white can just defend the king side, and then eventually win if black's attack bounces off of f4. Now, black didn't play knight f4 here, and I think that was one of the critical moments to consider in this game. I think that the reason would probably have been bishop to g4. And now, if you retreat with the rook, white can just trade, and come out ahead a piece. So black could look for a tactical solution here against this threat of bishop f5 and bishop d7 and knight f4. And you can try this move, and then blind would go bishop f5. Now if black takes back, white can save the rook, and white's up in exchange. And can try and win prosaically from here. White has, the strong a pawn and a rook against a piece, plus threats of like g4 or rook takes d3 from here. So bishop f5, the line to calculate, to be careful, is this. And then white has this move, bishop h7. And this seals the game. You can calculate from here that if king h7, you can play queen c2, getting out of the attack of the knight, and then you take their queen for free. And if king h8, you can take the queen with check and again save your queen. So I think this was like a key point here, that black wasn't able to take on f4 at this point, and that gave white time to shore up this f4 point. And this f4 point is kind of restraining black's 3 heavy pieces from getting into the game, as black seeks some desperate counterplay or countermeasures in this game. So black put a different rook on the e file, and white's just plays super defensively, just covering everything. Rooks on the second row are very, very good for defense in general of an opened king. But they're not great against the opponent having doubled rooks on the e file. So like if this rook could come to e7, these rooks might actually be awkward for white because they can only defend 1 penetration point at a time. And you would really want to be able to challenge doubled rooks by playing rook to e1 and trading them. But this rook is not easily getting to the e file. So for the moment, these rooks defend very nicely. They defend each other, and they defend a lot of attacks against the white king. And black goes for a sacrifice to get in here, and from here on, it gets pretty messy. I'm not convinced that white plays the best moves here. I'm not sure why he throws in the rook e8, because now he can't queen with check. And black just keeps throwing everything at white here. Knight e5, threatening knight d3, and if you take, then black gets in with check, and king here, and queen f3. So white's light squares are super, super weak after this rook sack on e2, right? Having put all these pawns here. So black comes into the light squares, and has got some serious threats here, and now suddenly white just ignores knight d3 and plays a6. So it turns out knight d3 is probably just not much of a threat, because basically it'll trade the knight for one of these rooks. Well, black just traded a rook for a piece. White's not trying to win based on the x-ray exchange, but based on this a pawn here. So black keeps like looking around for some kind of tactics, and Fedoseev, kind of cold-blooded calculation here, just running his a pawn, then sacking this piece. And to my mind, this got super, super hairy as black comes in with every single piece, and his king is like almost checkmated, right? It's in this box of control. And yeah. Super crazy. He has to sack everything. Threatens checkmate on e8. Black sacks the queen to checkmate with queen b1. And then this move, queen a2. And black resigns, because white will just actually collect the b pawn and then leave these pieces hanging. To my mind, he kind of finished it off in a super crazy way. I don't know if it was necessary for it to get that intense. Instead of d4, could black, right? So yeah, so the key question would have been, could black play something like queen e7 instead, maybe? Because queen e6, there's knight d8. So let's go queen e7. But the thing is, this bishop's covering this checkmate, and this rook's covering this checkmate. So is there anything to stop white from just queening here? I mean, you can play like rook h2 to trade this rook and start making a mating threat on e2. But that seems a little bit slow then, right? Take it, and now knight d8 check. And, you know, from here, white can play a move like queen d2 to cover this. He's also taking some things with check, potentially bringing his... I guess the black king does get away over here. So white has to go for something like this, check this, and then here maybe, covering queen e2. And probably black is out of ammo at that point. But yeah, it definitely got like pretty messy looking, you know. From here, it seems like you should win with the a pawn pretty securely if you just play carefully. But He uses g3 to cover the f-file, and then black just takes that bishop, and suddenly it's like really a mess to control these squares. So that was how Fedoseev tied Ryazantsev in the previous round. You can see like this advanced Caro line, how critical it was, and it produced like maybe half of the wins in this tournament. The Najdorf and the